Welcome to Live, Let, Thrive, a podcast about the Airbnb life, the share economy, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Myka and Steve.
Hello.
And welcome back to another exciting episode
Of Live,
Let
Thrive. What's up, Micah, man?
I'm chilling, Stevie Stacks, on this halfway beautiful, sunny Texas day.
Halfway beautiful.
Yeah, clouds in the sky. It's halfway beautiful.
It's always a beautiful day when we're above the dirt, I reckon.
That's right.
Yes, so this is episode 246 of your favorite Airbnb, VRBO, short-term, mid-term, long-term rental podcast in the world, coming at you from Arlington, Texas, and Fort Worth, Texas.
Yes, sir. Let's go.
And we have a special guest today, Miss Precious Price. Who's that, you ask? Well, let me pull up her bio and tell you. Precious Price is a business consultant and innovative housing advocate. Say that 5 times real fast. In 2019, Precious purchased her first investment property on the south side of Atlanta. This hobby quickly became a passion and later a full-time endeavor when she documented the process of designing, building, and renting a tiny house in her backyard. This series, titled Going Tiny, has garnered more than 250,000 views on YouTube and has become the springboard for the growth of a 6-figure short-term rental portfolio. There's a bunch more, but we're going to dive into it. Welcome to the show, Precious.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Thank y'all for having me. This is going to be a good conversation.
That is so cool. And I was talking about this with a buddy of mine at work today. It's funny that he's getting into the whole Airbnb game. You know, he just got his first property a few months back. He's all excited, you know, the first, feeling. He bought it. He bought a property in Shreveport and he's all excited. He's getting it booked out and he's consuming every single video on YouTube, podcasts or whatever. And he's saying a lot of these people that he's following on YouTube, because man, they just started with their first property and they documented everything, they filmed it, and now they're getting like requests from Netflix for a show. It is so cool. I get to watch their progress, and I'm just like, man, that's such a great idea. Just have a camera filming everything you're doing.
Yes, absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for documenting your journey. Even if nobody is watching, document it for you. And when you start documenting your journey, you're really able to, number one, like see things throughout that journey. But also, like, once you start putting it out there, you don't have to have this like goal of, oh, I'm gonna go teach somebody something. Literally just document what you're doing, document telling your story, and from that, people will pull their lessons. You ain't even got to overthink it.
I like that. And that's kind of like how me and Myka started this when you know, we met up at an investment group, little stock investment group I had, and he told me about Airbnb. I was like blown away. I was like, dude, we need to record some podcast on this. And he was like, what? And so we ended up doing some podcasts because he started it, and then I got it. He got me into Airbnb and short-term rentals. And then what's cool about it, you know, we get to see where we came from, and this documented. It's there forever, right? And that's the cool part. But also, I don't know about you, if you still had your job while you're doing this, but you know, a lot of people start noticing, oh, he's the Airbnb guy, he's the short-term rental guy, he's buying houses, and they ask you a million questions. It's cool to say, hey, just go check out the podcast. It'll answer all your questions there.
Yes, 100%, because you find yourself answering the same questions all the time. Everybody has the same questions. That's why you got an FAQ. That's why you got the intro episode. Like, it answers all of that. So I agree. Like, being able to point them to a particular resource, like, hey, it's out there and it's free. I ain't even gonna charge you for a consultation. Go check it out.
Straight up. Now I have a question for you. So you said you're based out of Atlanta, and I think you said you run how many short-term rentals down there?
I previously ran 8 short-term rentals down there. I currently have 0 short-term rentals now. My rentals are midterm.
Oh, okay. Let's go into it. That's what people want to hear. So, like, okay, question. Did the regulations make you go midterm? And if so, well, how did you get into midterm?
No, so I got into midterm because the market started shifting toward the end of, it was already shifting before then, but toward the end of 2021 is when I really started to notice how those market implications were affecting not necessarily my portfolio, but the messages that I was receiving from people regarding my portfolio. So I started receiving messages from like single parents. I started receiving messages from local students, and they're like, hey, I see you have these rentals. I know you're doing like short-term Airbnb right now, but is it possible for you to do a month to month? Is it possible for you to do some type of discount? Because I've just recently been displaced, or my rent went up, or I just cannot find any housing around my campus. And honestly, like, it was a whirlwind of perfect timing as well, because that was right around the time where I was, again, we had those 8 units, things were going really well, but it was a lot of overhead and just work. And I'm like, okay. And then on top of that, I think it was also just like a little voice in my head just saying, you know, even though in many people's mind, right, like it could be only 8 units, or it could be like, damn, you got 8 units. But like, really, it was a matter of, it started to, I guess, be a little voice in my head of like, okay, well, these are 8 units that if I wasn't necessarily just trying to, you know, pad my pockets, people would have somewhere to live. Like, somebody who needs it in the area, who needs to be closer, they would have some stable housing. And this is also around the time as well that I was really doing a lot of research, and I started doing like social impact consulting, meaning like, how are our decisions affecting, you know, the economic mobility of the individuals around us? And that then led me to like, okay, like, I think I can still be in this play of doing like short or maybe midterm rentals, but I'm doing rentals for good, not just like, hey, I'm going to rent to the person who's coming in from vacation and they willing to pay the highest dollar every single time. Nothing wrong with it. But for me, it was just a matter of like, okay, I think I want to approach this a little differently, especially at the point that I was really becoming a thought leader in the industry of short-term rentals for especially people of color. And with that, those are the very same people that were being, you know, disproportionately affected by this housing crisis that we found ourselves in.
I love that. Love that. Now, one question I have for you, with you making that switch, because I know you said it started off with college students and now you kind of using a social impact. How are you finding your clientele, your midterm rental clientele?
So universities, there are literally a heavy concentration of universities here within the city perimeters of Atlanta. So I pretty much reach out directly to those universities. I have people who either attend the universities, and they send out messages. They'll send out blasts to the students. I prefer graduate students, medical students. Morehouse medical students is where it's at. That's typically where I get most of mine. But it's perfect because, again, it's like they got the income to do it, right? And on top of that, it's like, it's not a ton, because like they there to study and sleep for the most part. Like, they're not really partying anymore. Undergrad is where you get the parties. Like, they about the business because you're paying a lot of money for school.
Now, one thing I always hear, you know, people are afraid to rent to college students because of the partying, like you mentioned. Now, do you make the parents be part of the lease, just so like if something happens, I mean, it's going to go on their credit, and it's not, you know, the kids are like, they don't really care about credit at a young age, or how does that work?
For me, no. Again, I don't rent to undergraduate students. I rent to graduate students, and more specifically, these are medical students. So number one, they're a bit older, and then number two, they have a little more sense of responsibility. So no, like, I don't get the parents involved at all, because at this point you're over 21. And most of them are nearing 25, if not past 25 already. So it didn't make sense to me.
Wow. So how do you set up your places to cater to your avatar, these medical professionals that didn't need a great place to sleep and study? How do you set up your places?
Number one, making sure it's quiet. Blackout curtains are, you know, your best friend, especially if you're catering to any type of working professional. Number two, for me, especially when they are either working or they're like in school, medical school, or what have you, I found that I actually preferred, rather than renting a large space, because for me, I had houses as well, right? So rather than renting a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom house to just one working medical professional, I'm able to separate that out into, hey, these are 3 private suites. Each of you have your own bathroom area. And then at that point, it's like you're amongst, like, you're coming to this new city already, where you're looking for a community of people. So I'm putting you in place for that community of people. But then also, it's like, these are like-minded people as well, that they typically are on the same schedule as you. So for me, switching over to renting out like individual suites within the units that I had was a game changer for this particular population, because it allows you to, if you're wanting to provide like more affordable housing, still provide that affordable like rental, but be able to turn a really good profit, because again, you're renting each room out separately at a particular cost rather than just the whole home.
Now, question I have for you. So like, you know, I've heard of people written to like nurses, like, you know, and they're in a certain proximity from like the hospital. How far is your places from these universities to make it more appealing to your clientele?
100%. That's a great question. We're 12 minutes from downtown, 12 minutes from central downtown. We're about 13 minutes from Morehouse. We are only maybe 15 minutes from Georgia Tech. Georgia State is downtown, so that's 12 minutes away. Like it's prime. And I think that was what really worked for us as well, is like the location, like location. People don't want to commute. And that's what a lot of, number one, like these students were having to do. But number two, these traveling professionals, like they don't want to have to do that. But because of the affordability of it all, they had to. So coming into the market and providing something that's more affordable, but I'm also coming in saying like, hey, you only gonna have maybe a 12 to 15 minute commute. Like, it was a game changer. It was a no-brainer.
Man, I love that. I didn't even realize. And I forgot it's so many universities down there. You can cater into like 5-6 universities.
Exactly. Like it's so, because I don't know if Atlanta is like one of those cities that has the most, but again, like there are a lot, it's a high concentration of like, you got Spelman, you got Morehouse, you got Clark Atlanta right there. Then you got Georgia State. Then you got Georgia Tech. Like there's a ton to cater to. SCAD as well. Like, yeah, it just made sense. Like when I saw that, like as a marketer, like traditionally my background is in marketing, it only made sense. It only made sense.
That's awesome. I got into Clark Atlanta, by the way. I didn't go, but I.
But you got a plug. You got in.
I got in, but I didn't go. Go ahead.
Now, do you separate the houses as much as like, okay, this house is just for men and this other house is just for women, or do you mix them?
I mix them. I mix them actually. And when I initially thought that would be more of an issue than it actually is, but it's not. Like mixing them has been fairly good. I've had maybe 1 or 2 people like reach out like, okay, I might have some reservations, but once they actually meet the people and they see how we have it set up, they don't mind either.
Okay. Now,
yeah, so
all your units here, because you said you break most of them up by room so you can get the max amount, you know, the max for them. Exactly. Now, do you own or do you arbitrage?
Both.
I love it.
Yeah. Both.
Okay.
Yeah. So I own arbitrage. So I own 2 and then I arbitrage 1.
Okay. And then the ones you arbitrage, do you break those up as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
No, because again, to me, like this is the after 3 years of having a number of units, renting them as whole units to people, and then even furthermore renting them to like the travelers, the vacationers. Like I wanted something completely different. And this was like my completely different thing of like, okay, I can rent these out by room. These are mid-term rentals, meaning like this isn't necessarily a 12-month lease, but like they're students, so they might be like a 6, maybe 9 months. And yes, like absolutely, it just made sense. And I don't personally, for me, I don't think I will go back to the other end, like to the other end of just renting wholly, unless it's like a long-term rental. Like I'm renting to some family, you know?
Okay. Nice. And then the biggest question I really wanted to get to you about was the tiny home in the backyard. Yeah. How did you come up with that concept? So kind of explain to us what you did, because you have basically 2 houses on one lot, right?
Exactly. 2 houses on one lot. So you're maximizing, you know, the existing lot space that you have. For the most part, this idea came to me this was at the beginning of the pandemic. I was back in the principal structure on that particular property. So I was back in that primary structure because I was no longer traveling for work. All of the bookings for Airbnb had been canceled. If you remember March 2020, they canceled everything. And at that point, like I'm back in my house, or this house that is like my first property. And I'm like, okay, I don't want to pay this mortgage. And I also didn't want to compromise my health or risk my health by, okay, well, maybe I can just house hack it because it's just me here and, you know, I'll rent the other rooms out. Again, I don't know what these people, like, where they're coming from, what's happening. This is at the beginning stages of COVID. So I believe I was in my kitchen. I look out the window and I'm like, it's some space back there. And I knew I wanted to do something with it. Initially, it was like maybe a pool. Then I'm like, nah, that's not going, no. And this is also around the time that, like, you know, these HGTV shows around like tiny homes and converting school buses into houses and all of that was really gaining a lot of traction. And people were on YouTube just looking up things around tiny houses. And I'm like, yeah, I think that's the play. Like, I'll build a tiny house back there. And then initially when we started building it, like, the whole idea of it was for it to be for me. It wasn't until we got halfway through the build, some hiccups with a number of different contractors. We ended up being over budget more than we had anticipated. And I made the decision to say, like, all right, like, we're going to rent this out to get that ROI back quickly, rather than me just staying in there. Because especially, again, it's like, tiny homes were becoming super popular. People wanted to experience one for themselves. And honestly, it ended up being like, that was my most was, because I don't rent it anymore. I now live there. But it was my most popular listing. People loved it, honestly.
Okay. Now, what made you move? Okay, so you moved into your backyard and then you rent out the front space?
Exactly.
So you rented out by room?
Yeah.
Okay, how did you come to that decision?
To move in?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, so number one, it was the top of this year. So I just moved in like the top of this year. And it was a matter of my lease at my other place was ending. And I've known for a while that it's like, okay, I want to do some like heavy traveling, like some digital nomad type stuff, or like live out the country for like 6 months. So this was a way for me to like say, okay, let me not go and sign a 12-month lease, because I don't want to do that. Like, I'm planning for some travel. And then number two, I can also save some of my cash so that I can do those travels and enjoy myself even more. So it just works because it allows me to be in and out without like a burden of a $1,500 rent or something else hanging over my head. So even for like the month of May, I'm going to be out in Mexico City from like May to the beginning of June.
Nice. That sounds awesome. So how did you become famous? You TED Talks. Talk about your TED Talk first, because I saw that on your thing. How was that?
Number one, am I famous? Is that what it is?
So yeah, Myka said you're the CNBC gal, so yeah, you're famous.
Yeah, I've had a lot of features at this point. They're coming in hot, coming in quick. So the TED Talk came about last year, so last June or July. Again, after I had shifted from short-term rentals to like mid-term rentals, this is also when I began building or like started the concept for this new startup that I'm currently working on, which is called Landdrift. And Landdrift is pretty much, it's completely tied into this piece around tiny homes, which are formerly known as ADUs. They're accessory dwelling units. Many people don't actually know the term, but that's the term. Tiny home is something different, but that's what we use because that's what people know. But Landdrift came about, and this was pretty much a way, after I had documented the whole thing, we released the docuseries. It's gaining traction. Like, people are asking questions, they're reaching out. I started to realize that there are so many homeowners who don't realize that this is a possibility for them, or they didn't even think about it. Like, they didn't even think like, well, dang, I do have that. I do have a lot of space in my backyard, or even the ones that are like, my family's sitting on acres upon acres. And the thought crossed my mind to build a small community, but I just never really knew, like, I've never seen it happen. So that's when Landdrift came about, as a way to, number one, increase awareness and education and resources around providing urban homeowners with, the process and the knowledge that they need to actually do something like this and get into the ADU game to, number one, build equity, build wealth. Number two, earn some rental income. And then number three, you also have the opportunity to like house, family members that might be a little vulnerable as well. So at the time last year, that concept came about. I was starting to build it. I didn't necessarily know how I wanted it to look, but I began pitching at like local business events and networking events and all of that. And I was at a spot called Atlanta Tech Village. They had like a pitch Friday where I pretty much pitched like Landdrift. I pitched what I wanted to do and how I wanted to help homeowners put tiny homes in their backyards to pretty much help offset the housing crisis. And it just so happened that the TEDx Atlanta organizer was sitting in the audience. And after hearing the pitch, she's like, okay, yes, like I need you on stage. This is an amazing idea. And from there, I would say like the rest is history. And I started it. For years, I would be honest with you, I speak professionally. I speak as like, I get paid and all of that. And I've done it for years on a number of different topics, but so I always wanted to do a TED Talk. But never in my days would I have imagined it would be about housing and tiny homes.
Wow.
Never what I would have imagined. So yeah.
You can't predict the future, man.
No, you can't. You cannot. Like I was not planning to even like, I'm gonna become a real estate professional. Like I'm gonna become like a real estate investor. That wasn't a plan. It was just like, I'm gonna buy a house and I think it's pretty cool, you know? And I'm gonna just document my process and tell other people about it, like tell them the story, sing the gospel of it. And just from there, like everything else started rolling. And that really became the catalyst for me being able to go full-time into entrepreneurship. This June would be 2 years.
So what I'm
go ahead. Go ahead.
So what I'm hearing is like a total like knowledge bomb in a way, because what I'm realizing is maybe the government can't figure out how to do the housing sort of, solve the housing problem, solve the homelessness. Maybe it takes an entrepreneur.
That's the point. Exactly. Like Landrift, we are really like wanting to work on a grassroots level because we've been doing it the same way for years. And the person who is most, I would say, affected, who's most important in the equation of talking about housing and real estate is often forgotten, which is the homeowner, the community member, people who are actually out on the ground. They bring in the developers, they'll bring in the nonprofits to advocate for it. We'll bring in the city council people, but it's really the actual residents that are in on that conversation in terms of what it looks like and what they can actually do within their city. So honestly, it was like a conglomerate of things that came together. I started thinking about, even in particularly the Black community, how we tend to think about real estate investing as well. We have these phrases and these terms, like buy back the block and we gonna do this and you don't want to sell grandma's house, but we never talk about on a practical level, what does that really mean? Because I also, I read some work and she has some amazing TED Talks as well. Her name is Majora Carter. She's like an urban, I think like she calls it like revitalizationist. Either way, just crazy, amazing story. But she has this premise around, you don't have to leave your community to find a better one. Like, and for so long in the Black community, your like how successful you are is almost determined by how far you get away from where you're from. So I'm from Chicago, but it's like, oh, but I'm in Atlanta now. This would be a completely different conversation if I was in Chicago and I'm from Chicago and I'm in Chicago and it'd be like, oh, well, damn, like, did you make it out? When it's like, it shouldn't be a question like that. I should be able to stay within my own community and build it up and revitalize that and be able to, reap the benefits of it rather than going to a different community or being there. And now I'm pushed out by different populations.
And you just said a whole mouthful right there of game bars. And before we hopped on the cast, I told you I seen you because my mentor posted you. And mentor actually, what you just said is what she went through. She built a 50-something odd community home in Little Rock, Arkansas. Her name's Pam Brown Courtney. You might know her. She built like 50-something homes. But the reason she built those 50-something homes is because she moved out to the Heights, right? Where not too many of us are out there, not too many Black people out there. And so she just felt unwanted. Like people just didn't really treat her fair. So she said, forget it. I'm just build my own community of houses. And she did. She built a 50-something house community and she rents it to all the people who can afford to live there that are there locally. And she helps them out, man. So now I'm very happy you mentioned that. And I'm also, one thing I want the listeners to grab is you said you never had any plans of becoming a real estate investor. You became one by just simply buying a house. And that's why I tell people, just try something. It's like at the beginning, Steve talked about us starting this podcast. We just tried it, right? But look at the doors that this podcast is open for us. We can do speaking engagements. People invite us places. We'd have been the top of Sean's penthouse, all types of crazy stuff. But it's just because we documented that journey. So yeah, try new things, y'all. And that was a whole bar she just dropped. Thank you for that. I know Steve got some questions, but go ahead.
Okay. One thing, okay, we're trying to balance the government with entrepreneurs, with housing. Okay. One thing a question that I'm thinking of is, were there any laws against people building ADUs in their backyards?
Of course. Traditionally, like everything else in this country, what is it rooted in? Absolutely. Like, yes, there were laws that were preventing that. And even furthermore, like different, what it's called, like exclusionary zoning policies that are making it to where we're prioritizing this same thing just because it's been like that. And that's how we started it. We think that that's just how it has to be. And I think it dates all the way back to like, this, like what we deem, I talk about this in the TED Talk as well, is like the American dream of, you want the single family house with the family, with the car, with the white picket fence. And you want, the big yard so the dog can run around in. When we were focused very much on like having, your traditional, I guess, nuclear family, that made sense. But people are marrying later. People are staying single because they just realizing a lot more things. We have seniors who they have these houses that they've been in for years, and now they're not even able to properly take care of themselves and move around as much as they need to because they're stuck within this one type of housing, rather than really designing housing in a way where it's like, it shouldn't be a matter of, in my community, it's all the same type of people who need the same type of things, who are making the same amount of money. So when we're looking at like how policies have been affecting, or like even like the laws around all of this, a term that people tend to, I guess, use, or two terms that I think would be very helpful, especially for, I don't even like to say, because I think you mentioned Myka as well, like you're a real estate investor, like the moment that you're in your community, like you need to just be thinking about yourself as like a real estate investor, like you have stake in everything that's going on around you. And the whole mission with Landrift is like, how can we create the next generation of socially conscious real estate investors? Not just the real estate investors that are focused on individualism, but collectivism as a whole. So when we're looking at the policies around it, it's really very much focused on like the individual, is focused on like, okay, what we've traditionally done, exclusionary zoning policies, having the same type of people within your area. And if it's anything else, then that's just it. This like idolization of suburbia. And like, once you really make it and you really get what you need to, it's like, okay, I'm gonna go buy a house out in the burbs. Like that's what we think about. But that's not necessarily like what it needs to be. So two terms or two phrases that are super important right now are, number one, like increased density, meaning how can we create more housing in the areas that, we already have developed, like increasing that density there to have more homes. And then even furthermore, missing middle housing being not just like, okay, everything that's in between, like, okay, a super large apartment building and a single family home. So you can have like a duplex, a triplex, like a cottage court, like all of those things are super important, again, to like, we're not just building houses, but we're building community, because community is then what leads to this upward economic mobility, upward social mobility. All of it is connected. Your housing is connected to how, your kids are going to receive an education, which is connected to the types of jobs you're going to be able to access.
Yep. I'm loving this. I'm going to give you two people I need to make sure you need to go on Instagram and follow. Make sure you're following Chris Senegal and Pam Brown Courtney.
Yes.
Because they're going to look.
I'm following Chris.
Yeah, that's my boy.
Yes, I follow Chris.
Yeah, follow Chris. But what you're talking about is very, very important, because like how you said, people fall in love with suburbia. I'm going to show you. Okay, so right now I'm buying this house. It was a little too far. It's in the hood, right? And I revamped it or whatever. And then I started noticing, now this place next to me, the place next to me, these other investors started buying it, right? So I'm like, I'm like, but they, of course, they don't look like us. So what happens is I'm starting to notice, like back in the day, this is in Little Rock, Arkansas. Back in the day, when Black people start really flooding Little Rock, which, they start flooding it, man, these people start moving out to like the burbs. Like white people move out to the burbs, like out to these places called Benton Bryant. Like my dad's first house was like in the middle of the, it was all white people around him, right? When he first bought it. Now it's straight up hood. But what happened was the reason why people need to start holding on to the land, especially African Americans, Hispanics hold on to the land, is because when you start moving out to the suburbs, what happens is you have this thing called white flight. So those people who bought those houses out in the suburbs, they go and re-gentrify what was just the hood, and now they build it back up. So I'm sitting here like, and I'm really on the verge. I'm like, man, should I sell this house? I'm like, it's still new, but I'm like, this dude next door just bought a house and tore it down. I'm like, so I might have to sit on it, but yeah, man, that is very important to like hold on to it, because it's it turns into a full circle if you don't hold on to it.
Of course, exactly, and like again, like I think that's something that Atlanta has been really trying to tackle. A lot of cities actually, because they're now starting to think about it, and I think COVID and the pandemic kind of accelerated that as well, because now we're working from home and people don't necessarily need to be in the city. So now it's like, okay, let me go buy a house or let me go further away because I'm working from home. But Atlanta and, a number of other cities at this point as well, they're beginning to focus on efforts of, okay, how can we decrease this legacy resident displacement? Meaning these people that have lived in, and they're truly, Atlanta bred, have been here for years, because Atlanta got a whole lot of transplants that are changing the dynamic of the city. But it's like, how do we make sure that the people that have been here, we're not pushing them out 45 minutes to an hour outside of the city and where they need to work and where the good school systems are and all of that. So yeah, no, all connected, and absolutely, like, we need to hold on to our land and not just sell grandma's house or go and sell those acres to the developer that's coming and giving you a big check. Like, really figure out the incentives that you can take advantage of within your city to go ahead and like build what you want. Like, all of us have the ability to, at the very least, you don't have to go and build like a huge apartment building, but you can be what's called a small scale developer. Whether that's just you developing something within your backyard, that's you repurposing that empty lot that's on the end of your block. Like, one of my mentors, his name is Arjon Anderson. He's a part of a bunch of stuff, but he's just done some amazing things. But what he likes to say is like, choose a community and develop that. Like, look at your project is the community. It's not just the house or the property. Your project is the community. And when you look at it like that, it's like, it's going to continuously reap dividends.
No, I'll go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was going to say real quick, 2 more people to follow. Al Williamson, you know Al?
I do not.
Okay, yeah, he's big time into this and to improving the block. What does he say? Own the block. What is Al Williamson?
He probably said own the block. That's probably what he was doing.
Yeah, he builds. Yeah, he builds hood adjacent, I guess, and he just keeps.
Yeah, he works his way back into it. Yeah, into that area, so he keeps it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he also Todd Baldwin out of Seattle, because he's been doing the renting by the room forever now, and he's makes way more money doing renting by the room like you do than renting the whole space out for one price.
Yeah. One question I did have for you, because you said there were laws about building the ADUs. Like, and I know, and I'm wondering, like, did the city, because I know the city of Atlanta is now recognizing ADUs and you can build in the backyard. How did you guys make that push? Because I would like to see that push made in Texas.
So personally, I didn't have to make the push. It was already there. It was already approved by the time that I was able to do that. Now what Atlanta is doing, or maybe what you're hearing about, is they're actually like creating more, I guess, flexibility in terms of, okay, are you able to convert a garage? Like, are you able to like add on to your house? Like, that's what they're now doing. But before, like, ADUs have been in certain zones, specific zones, they have already been like ready to go, approved. You don't have to do too much other than just pull your permits. But if you are somebody who's like, okay, this isn't necessarily approved within my area, you're gonna have to go through that process of rezoning. And I think everybody, no matter what, right? Like, whether or not you're wanting to get into real estate investing and development or not, whether or not you are wanting to build an ADU or not, whether or not you have to go through rezoning or not, you need to be attending your city town halls. Like, you need to be going to your city council meetings. They're talking about what they want to see in the city. They're talking about what you need to be investing in there. And once you build those relationships, it'll be a lot easier for you to go in and understand how you're able to I guess, pitch rezoning, or, you know, a rewriting of the zoning code for a particular address or a particular area. And
Real
then
quick
on
on
top of
that.
that, that's all you meet people. That's where you meet your community people, because typically it's a lot easier to change some zoning if it's more than one of you who are wanting to do it.
Steve, didn't I just say at the last meetup? What did I tell people? You got to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, man. That's where everything going down. Go ahead, Steve.
That's so true, because what we talked about it on the show before when we were involved in Arlington, Texas was going to ban Airbnbs. That was a big thing, right? And over there by Jerry's, the Dallas Cowboys, Jerry Jones started bringing in hotels, and they started canceling us, right? And so we started going for the first time in my life. You know, I went to those city council meetings, and then and Myka was going, and a bunch of us were going, and it was like, wow, most of the people there were older people that were going to these meetings all the time. Yep. And over there it was white. It was older white people. Of course. And they were going to the meetings. They knew all the council people by name, and they were the ones that was like, man, these are the people that are guiding our city, not
that are driving the voice. Exactly. Literally. And they're not even going to be here to see the choices and the decisions that they're making, they're voting on. They're not going to be here to see it, but yet they're the ones that are the loudest in the room, that are making the most impact. And then again, all of this is by design. It's no surprise, right? That typically these meetings are taking place, on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. Who the hell but those people have time?
I said that. See, it's funny. I said that. So when they were talking about banning it in Dallas, right? They would hold these meetings at like 8 o'clock in the morning on a Monday. I'm like, oh, you ain't about to get this. Ain't no representation of the city.
It's someone who has nothing else to do but that, and it's like, well, I'm gonna go do this. Like, no,
it's crazy. Not in my backyard.
Hello.
And that's and when you said that, as a revelation about the midterm, because you'll see apartment complexes, big giant apartment complex pop up, and single families, but in the middle, nobody wants duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes, and in most suburban neighborhoods, they don't want them, or they'll push them all the way to the bad part of town. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I'm like, but there's a need for that. I mean, there's, like you said, there's people that don't need a giant 3 or 4 or 5 bedroom house with all, if they're living by themselves, a young professional, they just need maybe a duplex is fine for them.
Exactly.
But so I see that there is a need for that middle housing.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Man, this is good stuff. Good stuff. So CNBC. So how did you get on the CNBC?
Documenting the process. They reached out on Instagram. They ran across my YouTube channel, which if you don't subscribe to me on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to me on YouTube. That's where you can see a whole bunch of tiny house content. I say a whole bunch loosely, but you can see a good amount. A lot of the features and all of that. But yeah, they ran across the docuseries on YouTube, and they were just looking for thought leaders in the space who were doing this, who knew the process. And so now I serve as a content contributor with them as well on all things ADUs and tiny homes.
Wow.
That's awesome. So by documenting the process.
So one question I have for you. So you've done what most Americans are trying to do, eliminated the living expense by house hacking, right? So with you being a real estate investor, house hacker, what are your goals, just as far as, besides your tech company, what are your goals as far as expanding in the real estate space? Because it sounds like you have a social passion behind it too.
I mean, expanding in the real estate space, honestly, I just want to keep buying doors and keep providing housing for the people that need it. That's it. Like, if you asked me the same question maybe 3 years ago, I would have told you I need at least 15 doors every single year. I'm getting what I need to, like, I'm padding. It was about me, right? Like, we learn real estate in a way of, like, I reference this a lot with Landriff, as well as, like, especially with people of color. I learned it for the most part, like, basics monopoly. And the point of monopoly is, like, you're going to get all the money, you want to get all the houses for you, and that's what you do. So yeah, like, no, my goal at this point is, like, I at least want to begin buying a house or two every year. And at this point, I will say, like, for those that are looking to invest, the one piece that I did not think about when I was choosing my time and my lifestyle freedom by going into entrepreneurship was the beauty of that W-2, and being able to go ahead and and easily get in and get the houses and the real estate that you need. Not to say that it isn't possible, but there are a couple more hurdles that you just need to jump through when you're doing that. So for me, it's really just a matter of like continuing to build what I need to build, continuing to acquire more properties. But I'm not doing it at a rate. I don't want to do it at a rate of like, okay, I need this by 30 or whatever. It's like a lot of my goals, and real estate included, have become far less about like the tasks that I need to scratch off of my to-do list, or, you know, the things that I need to do. And it's becoming far more about like, my goal is, you know, ultimately who can I become? Not what can I do, but who can I become? And yeah, that's where I'm at. So I want more freedom. I want to be able to travel even more than I already have. And yeah, like overall just be a good person and make impact on an everyday level. It doesn't have to be through, you know, being the next millionaire, Jeff Bezos.
I love that. I just got through reading the book, Awaken the Giant Within, and he said, write down your goals and then ask yourself, who do I have to become to be that?
In order to get that. Exactly.
I love that. I love that. Now, with you still are trying to buy a house or two a year. Are you going to be doing all midterms, or are you going to maybe like branch out into maybe Section 8? What are you looking at?
I don't know. I would absolutely be open to branching out into Section 8, but right now it's like I want to take everything that I'm doing from an ask, because it may not be one or two a year, right? Mm-hmm. Because even with one of the properties that I have right now, what I'm looking into is adding on like an addition to the house. So basically like an added attached guest suite. So then at that point, this is the same house that I have the tiny house at. So at that point, you would have the tiny house, you have the primary structure, and then you have this separate guest suite that's attached to the main home. Mm-hmm. And my overall, I would say goal again is to show people how can you really maximize your existing space, maximize your existing lot space to create that life that you want, you know, that real estate portfolio that you want, because even that is still, you know, like it's a small portfolio, but it's a portfolio nonetheless. And you're still able to provide housing to those that need it. So it could very well be like another property, but for this year, like my goal is tackling adding that attached guest suite to that property. That is my goal this year.
That's Al Williamson is big on that, right? Maximize the house, you know, every single bedroom, get another bedroom in there, get another bathroom, you know, just keep adding and adding, maximize it, and then get another one. That's exactly. Really good. Opportunity zones, are you investing in opportunity zones?
I mean, yeah, but not official. Like I've heard about opportunity zones before. I've researched them a bit, but in terms of intentionally investing in opportunity zones, not right now. Not right now in my real estate journey, no.
Okay, cool. So, man, this has been a great podcast. Come on and killed it. Yeah, Myka asked my question about Section 8, but you're not really getting into that yet. You found your target avatar, and you're catering to them, and it's working out great. So yeah, why change it up right now? You know, maybe in the future try something different. But I like that.
No, because we always, especially when you're, it's easy to think about that when you're in the real estate industry, but even more so when you are just an entrepreneur as a whole. Like we're always focused on, you know, what's next, what's the plan. And I stepped into, I would say maybe like within the last year or two, I've really stepped into like, okay, rather than focusing on what's next, let me focus on what's happening right now. And again, like, how do I maximize my now? Because when you're constantly like, especially after the pandemic, for me, I started to, mental and emotional health was just deteriorating, burnout, all of that. And when I started doing more research on it and reading more books, I found that it was because I always said, like, I'm a very future oriented person. Like, I'm always thinking about what's next. I'm always thinking about the goal. But the problem is that when you do something like that, your mind is in the future, but your body is in the now, and it creates a gap. Where you're always feeling like you're having to like strive after something, go after something else, rather than putting your mind, or, you know, every now and again, being able to bring your mind back to the now and say like, okay, let me just bask in this right now. Because I'm going to be honest with you, especially when I do a lot of these podcasts at this point. And the last question is always like, oh, well, what's next? Let's celebrate what's happening right now. Like I done got some features, you know, I didn't need a TED Talk just 6 months ago. Like it's, like, you know, I'm not focused on what's next right now. Like I want to bask in this because I've always been focused on what's next. And not to say that it isn't on my mind, but I gotta we really have to start basking in our excellence that's happening right now, rather than something that, is arbitrary in the future.
I usually don't ask a woman her age, but how old are you? You seem young.
I just turned 27 2 weeks ago.
You're young. Okay.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
One thing I will tell you that is huge. And by the way, one book to read is The Gap in the Gain. That's a really good book about
The gap in the game.
Yeah, about living in the gain instead of living in the gap. But
Yes.
one good thing that I do every morning, because you pointed it out, and I tell people to do this all the time, and it'll just make your day better. Just write out 3 things. I call it a GEM. Yep. I call it write out what you're grateful for, what you're going to experience, and what you're manifesting. So then you're not always focused on the future. You can focus on right now, your current day, and then you can focus on what you are going to attain, and then it'll start attracting to you. My mentor taught me that. He said, you got, instead of always trying to grind it out for what you want, grind for this, grind for that, just align with what you want, and it'll come to you. So yeah, every day, that's all I do. I have just pages and pages of just writing that out every day. Just going through what I'm grateful for. That will help anybody, especially if you're going through anxiety, depression, for sure.
Absolutely, 100%. Your top three great, starting your day with that. Not with your to-do list, but hey, what am I grateful for? Because it allows you to operate from a mindset of abundance rather than a mindset of lack. What have I not done rather than what have I done and what do I have?
Yep.
Beautiful. So what would you, like a young person, just graduating from high school or college, if they chose to go to college, now it's, being less and less an automatic thing you got to do. And they're getting out into the work world and getting their credit together. What do you suggest? Should they start investing in real estate right away? What do you suggest? Should they buy? How should they do it?
I would say I wouldn't even focus on starting to, I guess, invest in real estate, because you can house hack with an apartment or something. So I would say focus on, like, if you're a young person, focus on eliminating your living expense and getting in that mindset of not paying monthly as much as we do for living, right? That's what I would say. Like, don't necessarily okay, immediately go out and I got to start flipping or wholesaling and doing whatever. It's like, no, start at a very basic level, right? At a baseline question of how can I get rid of my housing expense every month? Whether that's like letting somebody sleep on the couch. Like, I have a friend, when I first got into Airbnb, this is my homie to this day. And I remember this was 2017, 2018. He had a 1-bedroom apartment and he was renting out an air mattress on Airbnb. And that was paying his whole rent. And then that's what, like, he now invests in Houston. He got a townhouse and he got a duplex and he buying land and all of it. But it all started with that that mindset of like, how can I get rid of this housing expense? So that is what I would say. That would be my recommendation. Like, if you're doing anything as like a young person wanting to get started with this, like, because that's going to allow you the cash flow to invest somewhere else. Like, if your cash flow is tied up at least $1,500 to $2,000 every month, if not more, it's just, it doesn't make sense. I think you need to focus on how do you eliminate that housing expense.
I love that.
Decreasing expenses is increasing income. People sometimes forget that.
Absolutely.
See, that reminds me of, like, you listen to Bigger Pockets.
I've listened before.
So the guys on there always say, or one of their shows, but like, people focus on, I got to cut out the Starbucks, or I got to cut out, this little payment here, he goes, you're focusing on the wrong expenses. That ain't going to make, it's a little bit, but it's not going to make a dent. You got to find a way to eliminate that housing cost, or that car expense, or these big expenses. Turn the car into a Turo, turn the house into an Airbnb out the bedrooms, live for free. Focus on those first, and then you can start, worrying about the little bitty expenses here and there.
Right.
100%.
So, okay, that's cool. So, like, okay, also a lot of our listeners, they're into the space. They're getting into short-term rentals. They're getting into mid-term rentals. Is real big right now. Now, how would you suggest, what are the steps to go get your voice out there and start documenting your process?
Social media, like, it's at your fingertips now. Like, when I first was, I'm young, but I ain't that young. So when I was first getting started, it wasn't, your TikToks and all. Like, it was you had YouTube, and you probably had Instagram and Facebook, of course. Those were the top 3. So I would really just say, like, if you're a young person, you're looking to begin documenting what your process looks like, literally just start, like, don't overthink it. Don't think that you have to go and you have to create a whole docu-series around something. Like, I had been creating content for years and I was ready to create a docu-series and produce all of that. But at the beginning, it was really just like recording myself in meetings, like having that camera up. And it's just like, even if you're not talking to the camera, because that's not something that you want to do, just record yourself right there. And we're in the era where attention is everything and people want to know all of your business and what you're doing and how you spending your time.
Mm-hmm.
So use it to your advantage, like have a camera propped up, and then, again, don't look at it from an aspect of, at least in the beginning, of I have to teach these people something. Like, of course you want to bring some type of value, and that value could just be from you being you and you operating in this space and you're just showing them what's happening. But don't take it from an aspect of trying to teach something, because I find, especially with, like, I do like brand and marketing workshops as well for folks. And people tend to overthink content when they feel like, well, okay, well, what am I going to teach them today? And what am I going to teach them? No, just tell people about your day and they're going to be able to extract whatever lesson that they take from it.
That's deep.
So I just say, like, just start recording. That's it. And even if you're not recording, start journaling. I started journaling like over 10 years ago. And that was a lot of the starter content for me. And even if, like, the documenting doesn't have to be for other people. Of course, eventually you want to get it there, but a good way to begin doing anything is really like starting to journal, because that's documenting your day to day. That's documenting your thoughts, your emotions. And then at that point, that's something that you can look back on, and it'll probably spark some really good content later down the line.
Journaling is powerful. I agree with that.
What was one of your biggest viewed, like, videos or social posts or something like that? You wouldn't expect it. You're like, wow, it got a lot of hits for some reason.
Oh my goodness. This is a hard one. Because I've gotten one that I didn't necessarily expect to get as much traffic as it did, was a post that I made on my birthday last year. It was my 26th birthday. And it was like, okay, here are 3 things that I learned in my first 25 years that I'm taking into my 26th year. And number 1, I'm looking at it right now because it was insane. It got like 50,000 views, almost like 1 million. Like it was insane. This one is on Instagram, and the most viewed one on YouTube, I would say, is likely, I believe, the CNBC interview. But this one in the post, like, lessons I learned, it's like, okay, to be happy, number 1, to be happy, I have to actively choose happiness. Number 2 is no is a complete sentence. And number 3, slow down. I am a human being, not a human doing.
Love that.
That is really cool. Yeah. Choose to be happy. I like that. How do you choose to be happy? What? See, here's the thing. I guess so. People that are like on the news, the camera's shoved in front of them and screaming for, housing. Housing is a right, human right. They need this, we need that. Government needs to do something. They don't seem too happy. But you are doing a lot of good, and you're being happy. How does that work?
I mean, I think it goes back to, again, bringing yourself to the present moment now. In this moment, what am I lacking? Nothing. Like, and I think that every single second that goes by, like, even if I had, something happened, somebody almost cut me off on the road or whatever, it's like, that's a bad moment. That's not a bad day. And that's constantly what I bring my mindset back to, is like every single second, every new second, every time that clock turns, I get to redefine what's happening. I get to choose. Like, a lot of it is really based on our own reactions rather than what's actually happening. Shit happens. That's literally why that's a phrase. Shit happens. That's it. But it's like, it's not what's happening. It's how are you reacting to it that's really the determinant of how you're going to view it and your perception to everything. So for me, it's really just a matter of, like, choosing it. Like, I'm not going to hold you. This week been crazy for me. It has not been a good week at all. It's probably been one of my worst weeks this year. And that's just like on an emotional level, on everything. I'm overwhelmed. But I get on here and it's like, this is the piece that I will say, and I think this will help and kind of add it into context. Last year, I really wanted to define my purpose and my why. And for me, it's actually my screensaver on my phone. But I'll read it. And I think this will help in terms of seeing how and why I'm able to choose happiness like as much as I do. So my why is really that I believe in the interconnectedness of the universe and understand that my actions and my purpose are inextricably tied to someone else's. So it is in my best interest to operate with joy and in alignment so that I can experience a life of least resistance.
Mm.
When you happy, you just like, I'd rather, I think I heard someone say, like, I'd much rather flow with the water than battle with the rocks. If you're looking at more of a creek.
I like
Love
that.
that.
And I bet a lot goes into, like you said, and on your second thing was no is a complete sentence. And what do you mean by that?
I mean, say no. Like I for so long was a person that is like, I didn't want to tell people no. It's like, oh, well, yeah, I can do it. And you're saying yes to things that you know you don't have the capacity for, or you know that may not be like adding the value that you need at the moment. Like if it's not adding value, it's a no. Or no is like, it doesn't need an explanation because I stepped into, and again, first 25 years of life is like, it's like selfish isn't selfish. Like the way that we think about like, oh, like prioritizing self, like it all starts with me. And I can't give you anything if I ain't gave it to myself yet. So no is a complete sentence, meaning that I don't have to explain anything. If are you able to do this? Nah. You don't even need to know why. Nah. Nah, I can't. And that's just it. And it's like, I'm not gonna hold you. I'm not like the best with that. Like, cause again, like you can feel like you being rude or something, you know?
I'm gonna
Yeah.
Got you to help.
You can feel like you're being rude or something sometimes when that happens, but it's like no is a complete sentence. So often we want to explain ourselves after the no, or you want to put a LOL at the end, and it's no.
I'm gonna give you a book my real estate coach recommended to me. It's called Surrounded by Idiots. Read it. Really good. He talked about, finding yourself and then knowing how to deal with other people, telling people no, hey, no, just what it is, so, and then not having to think, oh man, what did I do? It's just no, yeah, it's really.
Like, and it requires other people to then step into their own, being and accountability and responsibility and understand that everything isn't about you. And I also like have started to understand too, is like how people interact with me on a day-to-day basis typically has nothing to do with me and everything to do with them. If you cutting me off or I see you like flicking me off on the road, you probably having a bad morning. Like your kids woke up late, you probably ain't getting nothing to eat. Like, you know what, I got a little grace for you. So that's how you have to operate. Is like, not like it has nothing to do with me. Like if somebody tells me no, it's like, okay, you just don't have the capacity. I'll follow up later. Stop taking things so personal. Like we're all living this life that in all of our lives are just as complicated as the person that you're looking at and you see on a day-to-day basis. So it's like you have to take that into consideration every single day. Like your problems aren't more, like they aren't heavier than anybody else's. We all carry it different.
You look to me like someone that does like to help people and has been helping people all your life, and that's great. But I've come to this realization later in life. You realize it more earlier because you already said no is a complete sentence, and you live by that. That's one of your things. But isn't it miraculous how these people that become to rely on you in a way to solve this problem for them, all of a sudden when you start saying no, hey, they figured out how to do it by themselves. They didn't need me after all. Isn't that a crazy realization?
You had it in you all along. You knew how to do it. You knew you could make it happen for yourself. Like absolutely. And sometimes all people need is that push. For you, like your boundaries, like your boundaries are for other people, yes, but they're also very well for you too. Like they're for you and they're for other people. So when you set a boundary and you're actually, sticking to it and holding it pushes the accountability and the responsibility on that other person. That, okay, what you gonna do to make that shape?
I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh my goodness. What a show. Thank you so much, Precious, for hopping on. We're not going to ask what's next because everybody asks you that. Who knows what's next? Who knows what's next? I mean, like you said, you wanted to be on a TED Talk all your life, and then you didn't know it was going to be you were going to be on there for real estate. Isn't that crazy? It just happened. Man, but you put in the work. You put in the hard work. You documented the journey. And people are noticing you. We noticed you, and we're so happy that you came on our show.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much. Like, this was an amazing conversation. I hope that it helps someone. If you are listening and it helps you or anything resonated with you, feel free to reach out to me, send a message. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about it. I love making new friends.
She might say no, but it's only for your own good.
Exactly. I might.
Quick thing. Where can people find you?
Everywhere. Google Precious Price. You literally just Google Precious Price. I'm on all platforms. LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube. I'm on Twitter as well. Not as much, but like you can go through my tweets. I say some stuff on there too. I drop gems. But I'm literally everywhere. So you can just find me just by Googling Precious Price or just searching on any platform that you like, that you typically frequent. You'll likely be able to find some content from me.
Awesome. Thank you,
Precious.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all.
See you soon.
Peace.
Right.
Bye.
That was a good episode, man. She touched on a lot of my whys in that episode, man. Just becoming a real reason why I became an investor. So that was a really good episode. Loved every bit of it.
Very, very wise girl for her young age, man.
Yeah. Very wise, And journaling, if you've been journaling for 10 years, you're going places, because I just started journaling and I'm 33, so it's power in that. It's huge power in that for sure.
That's what I love about this show, man. I mean, there's so much, there's so many young individuals coming on the show, young minorities, a lot of young minorities. We get all kinds, but you don't see that too much on the news how we're portrayed. But there's a lot of good stuff going on too in our communities, and that's just really, really reassuring, man. I love it so much.
Hell yeah, LLT control the narrative. Let's go.
Thanks. Well, so can we promote the masterclass right now, or is it gonna drop? When is it gonna drop? On the 9th, on the August 8th. I'm sorry. Not August 8th. It's gonna drop on the 8th of April. We're gonna have a masterclass, and me, Myka, Mike Brown, your favorite Argentino, Federico is gonna be on there too. We're gonna be talking some midterm. We're gonna be talking some short-term rentals too, of course. And we're gonna have a nice little program for you, and you can, we'll have some materials for you to download. It's the masterclass. Look it up on, on our go to our Live Let Thrive Facebook group or wherever you can find it. You know where to find Live Let Thrive, right, Myka?
Yes, sir. Find us at Instagram at Live Let Thrive, liveletthrive@gmail.com. Check out our link tree and our show notes below. That'll have access to our link tree and our masterclass. And hope to see y'all there. And thank y'all for continuing to listen. And thank y'all for everybody who came out to the meetup. It was great being able to talk to y'all. And continue. Thank you for continuing to listen. Remember to leave us a review and subscribe.
Yes, sir. See you on the flip. Peace.
Out.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Live, Let, Thrive. Be sure to tune in next week for all the latest in the world of Airbnb and all that entails. Bye-bye.